Right, greeting masterminders. I'm really excited about tonight. It's about the fourth habit, which is increasing productivity. And it's one that's very relevant to me at the moment because I feel like I've dropped a little bit in my own productivity. So it's been really, really great preparing this tonight. So I guess I'm starting off with asking you, how often have you found yourself in the situation of really working extremely hard and diligently and still at the same time feeling unproductive and unhappy and disenchanted? Have any of you ever had that experience? You may even love what you're doing, but nothing is kind of working out and becoming successful. And you keep thinking there must be a better way than this. And you're just feeling quite unhappy and quite disgruntled. You might even be in the situation where you're working so hard that other areas of your life are being impacted, like your health, maybe even your marriage, could be not spending enough time with your children, just all sorts of things that you really feel that this really hard work is not producing what you wanted to do and it's impacting all sorts of things. And then you also get to a situation, this is my dog Dee Dee, she just wanted to say hello with the squirrel. Also get to a situation where you want to look back and say, look, am I actually really making a difference? Am I going to get to the end of my life feeling like I've really achieved what I wanted to achieve? So I think the first thing that Brendan Borchardt encourages us to do is to look at what is the difference you're wanting to make. What do you actually want to be remembered for? And have you ever sort of found yourself asking, is your work-life balance what you would like it to be? These are all the kinds of things that he addresses in this chapter. I think he also kind of emphasizes one of the worst kind of feelings you can have is that you're really working really hard and you're just not making the progress that you're wanting, or you're fighting the good fight and your health is just taking a really a strain. So I think what I'm going to do, there's not very good light here and I'm struggling to read my own notes. He says that high performers have certain characteristics. So some of the characteristics that they have is that they're very deliberate in their approach about what they're wanting to be doing. They set priorities. What they're working on is important to them. And we'll come back to that just now because it is significant. And they stay focused and they avoid distractions. But most importantly, they're not only more productive, but they're more happy and they're more confident. And they found a way to be productive and still be healthy, still have a great love for the challenges that they're facing and a great love for the people that they're working with and the people that they're serving or the cause that they're serving. So he says productivity basics. One thing is the fundamentals to being productive are setting goals. So that's really, really important. And maintaining energy and focus. So if you don't have a clear goal of what it is you're trying to achieve, then you're not really going to be very focused. And if you are focused, there seems to be a greater flow of energy with what you're doing. And when there's this greater flow of energy, there's this intrinsic motivation, there's intrinsic feeling that things are worthwhile. And he says those are very important aspects to being a high achiever. And he says this doesn't just go for personal goals, but it goes for group goals as well. So when groups are involved in co-creating the goals that they're really striving for. They can work more faster and efficiently for much longer periods of time. They can pay attention to the tasks that matter, be way less distractive, and a lot more effective and a lot more productive. So we come back to energy also being a high factor in being productive. So back to the basics. You need good nutrition, good sleep, good exercise. But that's not only what energy is about. Energy is also about having positive emotions. So there were 3 studies that he cites. He says in 200 studies of 275,000 people, they found that happy people are more productive. They have higher evaluations of their work, and they're more dependable and creative. So that was the one study. The second study, which is quite interesting, students in college who are more happy 10 years after graduation were achieving higher and were financially more successful. And then a small study, but quite a fun one. He said, watching a comedy clip before you're going to be really productive, getting into that happy space, getting into that relaxed, happy space can also increase your productivity. Okay, so we've talked about setting goals, we've talked about energy. Then the third thing he brings into this, you need to maintain focus, which is really hard because we have so much coming at us, so many emails, so much on social media, WhatsApp, Facebook, the whole lot. It's very difficult to maintain focus. And he says, very importantly, don't begin your day by looking at your emails because it can be very overwhelming. And you don't want to start off your day thinking, because it's not only the quantity, it's the amount of information you're receiving. And it's all the sifting through you've got to do to see, well, what is important and what isn't important for me to pay attention to. So, and then the fourth thing he talks about is avoiding distractions. Distractions can be another downer, and he again produces some really interesting facts. One study showed that distractions can lower your productivity by as much as 20%. And if you try to multitask, it's really difficult to be focused because you can be focusing on a new task, but you still have your mind set on the one you have just been doing. And there's even been a study that's shown that people were really focused and really going for something, and they were distracted. It took them almost 2 to 3 hours to get back to that same level of productivity. So creating a space where you can be focused without distractions is very important if you want to be a high performer. And then he gets into this discussion about work-life balance. We often talk about work-life balance. And he said there are 2 beliefs that are not helpful in terms of achieving a work-life balance. The first is you'll never achieve a work-life balance. So for most of us who've done a lot of the mastermind training up until now, what you believe is what you create. So if you believe you'll never achieve it, well, then you won't. If you believe you will achieve it, well, then you most likely will. So you're on a wicket to nothing if you start off with not believing that you can ever achieve a work-life balance. And then he says the other fallacy is we think of work-life balance in terms of time. We think we have to apply the equal number of hours to everything. And he says it's not so much about the amount of time, but the quality and how much happiness. And so don't focus so much on how much time you're spending on each different area of your life that is important to you, but focus more on what is the intent in the time that you have. So for example, if you want to give some time to your children, then your intent is you really want to connect with them. You really want to give them some space and time to express themselves. You want to play with them. don't, okay, sorry, I think somebody's come in with their microphone on. So let me see if I can just unmute everybody. Yeah, I think I've managed that. Okay, so when you have an intent to spend time with your children, we'll then fulfill that intent. And as I was saying, don't focus so much on the time, but think about how you manage that time. Did that make you happy? Or did it make the people you were with happy? And was it progressive? Did you achieve what you wanted to do in that time? So again, not how much time, but were you happy and was it a progressive situation? And then he brings in quite a nice practical challenge. So if you've got a pen and paper now, let's do this. He says, every Sunday night, reevaluate your week according to 10 areas of your life. So just jot them down now. And this is kind of a very brief sort of, just grabbing a pen here myself, very brief, don't think about it too much. So in the area of health, between 1 and 10, what would you rate yourself? Okay, and in the area of family, between 1 and 10, how much meaningful time do you think you're having with family? Between 1 and 10, how would you rate the time you're spending with friends? Between 1 and 10, your intimate relationships, your marriage, your partner, what would you rate that between 1 and 10? And then your mission, your work, how would you rate that in this past week? In the past week, how would you rate your finances between 1 and 10? How would you rate adventure? How would you rate your hobby? So again, not how much time, but how much happiness have you felt? How much progress do you feel has there been in your hobby? Spirituality, between 1 and 10. And emotion, between 1 and 10. Okay, so now you've immediately got some kind of indication of where you're doing okay and where you need to pay some attention. So he says it's no use setting goals unless you can have some accountability or some way of measuring it, because otherwise you can't see how well you're doing or how well you aren't doing. So being able to regularly measure yourself in these areas is quite a nice checklist. Okay. And again, being in balance is not so much about time as it is about harmony and about feeling. How are you feeling about the different aspects in your life? How are you feeling? How harmonious or imbalanced do they feel? Do you feel like you're totally obsessed with one particular area so that everything else gets neglected? Or do you feel like you're creating some kind of balance, harmony? And then he says, your busy work needs to be your life work. So if your work that you're very busy with does not truly identify with you, you're not really identified with it. It doesn't really identify with the meaning that you have in life. It doesn't really identify with your end goals. And there's some kind of dissonance. Then that in itself can cause a lot of mental stress. And if you find yourself in that position, you need to be truthful about that. And probably sometime there needs to be some changes. And he says there's often a very fine line between busy and burned out. He says the good news is burned out is sometimes kind of very physically orientated, but often it's a feeling. It's a feeling of unhappiness, dissonance, stressed, overwhelmed. So that's something you can really change. And he says a very quick way of changing that very effectively. And he goes into this a little bit more, a little bit later on, further on in the chapter, is he said, one of the things we learned in the chapter in the habit about energy is how you make transitions. And when he means transitions, it means from one task in the day to another task in the day. So it could be from eating breakfast to sitting down to work, or it could be getting up from work and going to do some exercise. Every time you make that transition, he recommends a very useful practice. In that practice, you just close your eyes and you just say to yourself, release. And you release all the tension, you relax all the muscles in your body, and you just completely relax. And then as you move into the next activity, you set an intention. So if you're ever in this situation, so this should be part of your life, should be it's part of the habit of having energy. But if you're in a burnout situation, this is a very good way to turn that around. Regularly, and later on you'll know how regularly, you need to just stop, release, set an intention. Stop, release, set an intention. Okay. And this leads into the next section, which he calls take a gasp, break. He says, you would be quite surprised how much of a break your brain needs and how often you need to replenish those neurotransmitters in your brain, in just your whole bodily function, actually. And he says, optimal productivity, and this is good news, optimal productivity would happen if you take longer vacations. We'll say yay. And if you take a break every 45 to 50 minutes, can you believe that? Do not work. Do not have this attitude you're just going to push through. You're just going to power through. Every 45 to 50 minutes, you need to take a break. So the break is change your body position. If you're sitting at a desk, stand up. And the break can be for 2 to 5 minutes. It can be taking a walk. It can be a lunch break. It can be just getting up and chatting to somebody. It can just be letting your mind wander. It could be changing your circumstance to go for a short walk in the park next to your office, whatever it is. It could even be changing what you're doing from working to cooking. or just some kind of change that every 45 to 50 minutes. In fact, he says all the people that he works with who are high performers, this becomes a habit in their life. That is how they live. Every 50 minutes of their work life, 45 to 50 minutes, they take a break. He says if you want to feel more energized, creative, and effective at work, and still leave work with enough oomph for the life part of your life, the ideal break point is to stop your work and give your mind and body a break every 40 to 55 minutes for 3 to 5 minutes. Okay. And he says in that 3 to 5 minutes, do not look at your emails. It is not a time to catch up. It's a time to check out. Okay. And then I think this is the most important point for this evening. It's really been the most life-changing point for him, is that we need the most important part about increasing productivity, he calls your PQO. So he says nothing, he cites a quote by Peter Drucker. He says, nothing is less productive than to make more efficient what should not have been done at all. So nothing is more productive than to make more efficient what should not have been done at all. So he says, to be extraordinary, you need to figure out your the production output that matters. So he says high performers have mastered the PQO, which is prolific quality output. So he gives an example of that. Figure out what it is you're supposed to produce and learn the priorities in this creation, the quality of it and the frequency of it. And that will be one of the biggest breakthroughs you'll ever have in your career. And he cites a situation where he realized what it was he really wanted to be doing. He wanted to be a speaker, a writer. He wanted to create online training videos. So for a year, he really struggled with that. He tried to learn all sorts of marketing skills, all sorts of things. And one day, he was sitting in a cafe, a restaurant, and he came to the end of the day and he thought, there is nothing that I have done today that supports anything that I really want to achieve. And at that particular point in time, he decided, okay, the most important thing for me is whatever I do has to be supporting my prolific quality output. So he thought, okay, as a speaker, because he was spending a lot of time asking his friends, please let me speak to your groups. As a speaker, he needed to have speaking engagements that paid. As a writer, he needed to write books. As an online trainer, he needed to produce videos, online videos. So he worked out not what he wanted to do or what his goals towards that were, but where did he want to see the success? What was it that was the actual outcome that needed to be prolific? So he decided, because he worked out what was his PQO, which was actually just to get on with it and produce the videos, get on with it and write, get on with it and make the books, get on with it and speak. Because of that, nearly 2 million people have done his courses. 100 million people have looked at his video that is a free video about how to have energy and live life to the full. And he has been named by Oprah.com as one of the most successful online trainers of all times. And in Success Magazine, he's top personal trainer year after year after year. So he says when he cites all of those achievements, it's not to say, hey, I'm really great. It's to say the tremendous power of finding your PQO, your prolific quality outcomes. And he says, when you find what that is, 60% of your time, 60% of your week needs to be geared towards that. So if you want to write books, 60% needs to be writing your book. If it is duplicating in your team, 60% should be duplicating in your team. If it's to write a blog, 60% of your time should be writing your blog. The other 40% should be supporting that. So the other 40% might be team management, admin, strategizing, developing industry relationships, but that other 40% should be supporting the 60%. And then he says there are two things that people, once they've discovered what their PQO is, there are two things that sometimes slow them down. And that is what procrastination and perfectionism. He says some really interesting things about procrastination. He says procrastination isn't a personality trait. It's not a part of your psyche. It's not even about time management. But research has shown procrastination is a motivational problem. So your lack of motivation might be you don't know what it is that you want to contribute. It might be that you don't believe in yourself. It could be fears, but it's a motivation problem. So he says, if you were doing what you really wanted to be doing, you were clear about what it is you were wanting to achieve, and you were really making that impact, there would be very little procrastination. So I thought that was actually quite spot on. And then he said, I also like the way he speaks about perfectionism. He says, perfectionism is just a logical way of trying to still gain respect for doing nothing. He says, if you're going to be a perfectionist, you can't be a perfectionist and at least you've got started and produced something. Because if you haven't produced something, how can you be perfect about it? So he says, watch out for those two things that will trip you up. But again, he goes back to the most important thing is to choose something that really has meaning for you and work out what is your PQO. So in completing our call tonight, there are a couple of performance prompts. So this is again a time for action. So the first one is, what are the outputs that matter most to you in your career path? What are the outputs that matter the most? Okay. Anybody need a bit more time with that? Okay. Okay. What are some of the things I could stop doing so that I focus more on my PQO? What are you doing that's a distraction, that is a procrastination, that is not focused enough? What is it that might be imbalanced, lacking energy? What is it that could stop you from your PQO? Okay, and the fourth thing, the percentage of my weekly time I will allocate to my PQO is. So I know you could just say 60% because that's what you've heard me saying. But be realistic. Say something like 2 days a week or 4 hours a day or every afternoon or every second day, whatever it is. And some of these, I know if you're like me, you'll want to go back and think it through a little bit more. So that's okay. And then finally, the way I'll make that happen. So say, for example, you decided there are 4 things that are really important to you in your PQO, and you want to allocate that time on a daily basis. Say certain amount of percentage to this, certain amount of percentage of time or hours to that. How are you going to make that happen? Are you going to set time slots for that? Are you going to set an alarm that says, okay, stop doing this now and start doing that? Are you going to have some kind of accountability Excel spreadsheet? What is it that you're going to do to make that happen? Because it's one thing saying, okay, this is what I want to do. But as he says, if there's no goals and there's no measurement of that goal, you have no way of knowing how close you're getting to what it is you want to achieve. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to unmute everybody. Okay, see, as I don't see, I think I've been successful. So you're going to have to unmute yourselves, I think. Anybody want to say what they feel the outputs that matter to them are? It's quite a central question, actually, because this could be quite life-changing. It could be the breakthrough for you to not focus on an aspect, to focus on the core thing that you need to be very productive with. We need to really see those outcomes coming in. Anybody clear about what it is they want to be prolific with? What outcomes they want to be prolific with? I think I need to give myself more time to really be a bit more specific about this, but I guess for me it would be financial goals. It would support my passions. The financial goals, I guess, would be within the cryptocurrency industry. And the passions would be specific things like a luxury tented camp in Kenya. It would be more ecotherapy experiences, and maybe more locally, I'm exploring some dolphin research locally. So I think if I were to move on to the next one, what are the things I would stop doing? I think what I've been very focused on is more on the financial support side. And I've kind of let the other things, I guess I'd add to that writing my book as well. But I guess I've let go some of the focus on what really has meaning for me in life. And I'm needing to get a better balance for that. I need to get more time on some of the things that I've let go while I've had a financial focus. Anybody else like to contribute anything? You look like you're about to say something, Doug, and then you hold back. I can see your picture, so I can. You're disadvantaged.
I'm just hanging back today.
Okay, no problem. Totally fine.
I'm hanging back today. I've got my views, but I think, yeah, it's something I'm working on right now anyway. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, I think what I really like about Brendan Borchardt, I mean, his understandings come from so much experience and so much research, and he really seems to outline some really practical ways of achieving what we want to achieve. But he also seems to really get to the core ingredient of things. That if we really get what he's trying to say, it can really turn things around for us. Because I think a lot of the time we can work really hard, but not get where we really want to get to. And I think what he's saying is how we can work hard, be happy, and achieve where we really want to be going. So very thankful for being able to engage with his wisdom. If no one has anything to say, that's totally fine. Understand if it's all new and you want to reflect on it a little bit. And I guess as we go on through this particular habit, I'm sure some of the things will start to crystallize out a little bit more clearly. So I'm going to give you a chance to say goodnight, stand up and do something different and recharge. and lovely to spend some time with you, and a huge privilege to be able to share this with you because I find it so meaningful for me too. So, good night. Have a great evening. Bye for now.
Yes, thanks.
Good night. Bye.